All right, so I'm going to get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Stacy, and I'm a bookseller and the events coordinator at Belmont Books. Belmont Books, for those of you who are not familiar with us, is an independent and locally owned bookstore in Belmont, Massachusetts. Before we begin, I'd like to let you know that we have a number of virtual events coming up, including our book club, which is reading Girl, Woman, Other on August 3rd. And Caroline Leavitt, who's launching her new book, With or Without You, and she will be in conversation with bestselling author B.A. Shapiro. You can register for these and our other events on our website, belmontbooks.com, which is also where you can purchase Jamie and Mark's books. A reminder that your audio and video should remain turned off. Any questions can be sent to me via chat. I'm the host, and I will relay as many as possible to David and Mark after the presentation. This event will be recorded. We're very excited to welcome David, or Jamie as he goes by, and Mark. I want to tell you a little bit about them, and then I will turn the event over to them. David James Poissant, is it?
Yep.
Am I pronouncing it right? Yeah.
Yep, Poissant,
Okay.
sure.
Okay. The author of The Heaven of Animals, in print in 5 languages, and is the winner of several writing awards and a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. His writing has appeared in the Atlantic Monthly, the New York Times, One Story, Plowshares, and elsewhere. He is a recipient of scholarships and fellowships from numerous writers' conferences. He teaches in the MFA program at the University of Central Florida and lives in Orlando with his wife and daughters. Lake Life is his first novel. Mark Polanzak, hopefully I'm saying that right, okay, is the author of the hybrid work Pop and the BOA short fiction prize-winning collection, The OK End of Funnytown, which is the book that he will be talking about tonight. His fiction has appeared in the Southern Review, the American Scholar, and anthologized in Best American Non-Required Reading. Mark is a founding editor for Draft, the Journal of Process, and a contributor to the podcast, The Failsafe. Mark teaches writing and literature at the Berklee College of Music in Boston, and he lives in Salem, Massachusetts. And without further ado, I'm going to turn the meeting over to them. Enjoy the event.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stacy.
Of course, we talked over each other immediately.
Yeah, that's going to happen a lot.
Thank you, Stacy. We didn't discuss who would read first and all of this stuff, but I think that I'm the opening act tonight because my book came out in May. It's a short story collection. You have your new novel out this month, so I figure perhaps I should just warm up the crowd for your novel that will be coming up right after.
I prefer to think of it as co-headlining, but yes, you're welcome to read first if you want to.
That's very gracious of you. But I have my collection of stories came out in May, and this is all, of course, like during pandemic times, from Boa Editions. And it's been fun to do these virtual readings. I don't have to leave my house. It's great to have people from all over the country able to go to these things. So people from the Arizona program, people from right around the corner, people from Florida, welcome. Thanks Belmont Books for hosting this. This is cool. I'm gonna read the very shortest story in my collection. It's the last story in the collection, and it's called Used Goods. It was originally in an online magazine called Unlikely Stories, and they publish absurdist, sort of speculative stories and oddball things. And I think that that's perfect for what this story turns out to be. And it's a little bit representative of what you might get in the collection because it is absurd, it is a little funny, but it's also a little bit weird and sad. So let me get into it here. It's called Used Goods. And if something cuts out, just yell at me and I will fix it. So here we go, Used Goods. I needed a lot more than what I had managed to cram into the back of my Subaru for the move. It was a hasty job, which wasn't philosophically conceived. I simply hadn't thought the move through enough. But I recast my anxiety about leaving things behind into a dream of starting over. I took my clothes, some books, a few lamps, my computer and guitar, but I left almost everything else on the curb with a sign reading, "It's all yours now." Right across the street from my new apartment, there was a used goods store. Perfect, I thought. What do I need? I made a quick list, and I promised myself I would only get what I wrote down. I was only going to get what I needed this time. No more clutter. Bed frame, work desk, chair, kitchen table, pots and pans, bare essentials, a clean slate. But you never know what you want. You never know what you need until you are faced with all the things you want. Nearly everything on my list was in the first room of the store. So I told the nice people working there that I would be buying these things and coming back periodically to cart them away. Then, like a fool, I browsed. I've always liked stores like this, secondhand stores, antique warehouses, thrift shops, the kinds of places where you might find a gleaming set of silverware in a mahogany box for hundreds of dollars on the same shelf as a tape deck, missing the rewind button. You might find a bargain or an item no longer being manufactured, or a toy that you had misplaced years and years ago, a lifetime ago. The toy could be the very one that you played with, and it had its own lifespan, just like you. And here you two are, coinciding again. I always enjoyed that the items had other people's stories and lives imbued in them. Someone may have used the desk a century ago to write unrequited love letters by candlelight. I try not to get carried away, but I wonder and hope that something lives in the material. I pushed through a beaded curtain into a second room that housed cardboard boxes of VHS and cassette tapes, VCRs and radios, standing lamps, nightstands. Actually, I needed a nightstand and forgot to jot it down. Shelves upon shelves of old novels, glassware, cookware, paintings, armchairs, jewelry in glass display cases, magnifying glasses, large standing brass ashtrays, rotary phones, vinyl records, and dusty turntables. Some alluring nostalgia, useful but mostly unnecessary. The third room, which lay behind a heavy oak door, contained much the same as the first, but these items, on closer inspection, were damaged. A desk missing a drawer, an upright piano with only black keys. I suppose one could take this stuff home and fix it, but I'm no good at repairing anything. Best to just move on. I creaked open a beat-up screen door to enter the final room, which looked just like an old general store. Aisles stacked with cereal boxes and soup cans, refrigerators filled with liters of milk, bottles of juice, cans of soda, cartons of eggs, frosted brown bottles of beer and six-packs. I deserved it, I thought, and pulled open the glass door. Refreshing icy breath escaped the cooler. When I grabbed and lifted the six-pack, I tumbled backward. It was incredibly light. The bottles were empty, caps sealed to the tops. I held a bottle up to a light. Empty. I replaced the pack and grabbed another, light as the first. It felt good to hold the six-pack of empty bottles. It felt manageable. I felt a touch stronger, a bit more capable. I carried it around the store, thinking that I would inform the cashier of the beer problem when I was finished shopping. On the other side of the registers were long tables with board games laid out, a Scrabble board with words on it, a completed game. Stretch, perpendicular to higher, perpendicular to exit. A notebook rested next to the game. Initials were scrawled on top and scores were written down in columns. JM had beaten out WM and RP by 20 points. 2 tiles lay in the tiny wooden rack on this one side of the board, and 1 tile lay in the rack facing me. M. 3 points subtracted from WM's score. I put the notebook in my pocket and gingerly picked up the Scrabble board, balancing the game on my palm like a waiter. At the impulse buy section of the cashier, by the counter, or on the counter, I saw mason jars of Bic pens without caps, blues, blacks, 1 red. There were yellow stick-it pads covered with words, to do, laundry, groceries, oil change. Some words were scratched out. I placed the six-pack on the counter and withdrew a blue pen. I tried crossing off laundry because I had already done it. But the pen was inkless. The old man in line in front of me paid for a pack of cigarettes, opened it, and tapped out a crumpled, used filter into his palm. I bought the six-pack, Scrabble game, yellow stick-it pad, and 2 pens. I told the cashier that I would come back for all the furniture as soon as I made a friend to help me. When I came home to my new place, satisfied that I had only got what I needed, with just a few small gifts to myself, I put the finished Scrabble game in the middle of the living room floor, tossed the six-pack in the fridge, and began reading over a to-do list with my dry pen in hand. At some point, I cracked an empty beer and looked out the window, thinking that I was maybe going to make it, this time, in this new place. Then there was a knock on the door, but whoever it was, they were already leaving. That's the end. And that is the final story in the collection, Used Goods. So maybe that is a downer. Maybe it's just right. That is it. Thank you. Thank you for the virtual applause. Very nice. So now, Jamie, can I turn it over to you to read an excerpt from Lake Life?
Yeah.
You might be muted right now.
Yeah. There we go. Okay.
There we are.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself, but Stacy has rescued me, so I appreciate that.
Okay.
So yeah, that was wonderful, Mark. Thank you so much. I particularly love the image of the piano with only black keys. And I'm trying to imagine what kind of a song we could play on that one. But it's a beautiful story. For those of you who haven't purchased Mark's collection yet or read it, it's just a incredibly tremendous story collection that he's been writing over the past years. I had the opportunity to read it early and to interview Mark for the Fiction Writers Review, and we'll put up a link to that review or the interview, the conversation between the two of us in the chat comments, because we had a lot of fun talking to each other back and forth. But it's a fantastic collection. So I'm going to read as well. I'm going to read just a brief 3 pages. So the novel is called Lake Life. It came out this month from Simon & Schuster. And it's the story of a family who is selling a lake house, and they've gathered together for this last weekend. And just as they gather, this really terrible thing happens. There's a drowning in their cove, and the eldest son, Michael, the boy drowned. He dives in to try to save him, and he cracks on the bottom of the boat when he's rising. And so this chapter picks up, chapter 4, when Diane, Michael's wife, and Michael are in an ambulance on their way to the hospital, knowing that Michael's going to need stitches for his head because his head won't stop bleeding. So, the novel is told in 6 points of view. This chapter 4, is from the point of view of Diane, who is Michael's wife. And I think that's all you need to know. So here's chapter 4 from Lake Life. Diane Maddox exhales. Diane Maddox, who traded Tennessee for Texas. Diane Maddox, whose parents are divorced. Diane Maddox, who married Michael 10 years ago and wouldn't take her husband's name. Diane Maddox, who carries a child inside of her. Diane Maddox, who had an abortion in high school and who does not regret that choice, but who is not in favor of making that choice a second time. Diane Maddox, who went to school to be a painter before settling for those who can't do art teacher. Diane Maddox, who wonders whether 33 is early for a midlife crisis. Were women said to have those, and if those meant more than a red motorcycle and the affair to go with it? Diane Maddox, who has been reassessing her infinitesimal place in the cruel and sideways pressing world. Diane Maddox, who likes dangly earrings. Diane Maddox, who has always longed to visit Reykjavik. Diane Maddox, who grew up watching Mad About You and wanted to be Helen Hunt. Diane Maddox, who in 8th grade cried through the Mad About You finale, cried over the fact that Paul and Jamie were not together anymore. They would give it another try, the way Diane's parents gave it another try too many times to count, giving it another try, code for the pain a daughter feels when some mornings dad is there eating Cheerios and some mornings mom says, I hope that fucker drives that thing off a fucking bridge. Diane Maddox, who is unhappy, but for whom divorce does not feel like an option, whether to prove something to her parents or to Mad About You, she isn't sure. Diane Maddox, who wonders whether things would have gone better had she taken her husband's name, though of course a name can't save you. A name can't save a marriage, can't save a house from sale or a boy from the bottom of a lake. Diane in the ambulance, Diane not crying, keeping calm. Diane following the paramedic's instructions as the ambulance navigates country roads and the paramedic measures Michael's blood pressure. Diane Maddox, not Starling, and it's never too late to change a thing, except sometimes it is, pressing the damp cloth to the head of the man she loves, or loved. Some days, let's face it, she's not sure. Blood pooling beneath the cloth, the forehead, an awfully vascular area, the paramedic says, worse than it looks, which Diane takes to mean looks worse than it is, though she can't be sure. There will be stitches, though she hopes against concussion, against brain injury, against anything permanent, because, in all fairness, can the girl who said in sickness and health still speak for Diane at 33? Say Michael slips into a coma or spends his life in diapers drinking through a straw. Does the Diane who said, I do, love this man enough to wipe his ass another 50 years? And how to love a man who's made it clear, if not in words, then in scowls and sighs, in the way he picks strings from the frayed cuffs of his jeans, that he'd rather her not have their kid. Does she love Michael enough to stay? Does she love herself enough to leave? Diane doesn't know, knows only that Michael's blood is real and warm and won't stop rising from his head. The ambulance brakes, the doors open, and Diane breathes. The hospital is not what she was expecting. Small and beige and boxy, the building looks less like a hospital than a bank someone dropped onto an acre in the woods. Gently, she is pushed aside by a nurse at the curb. Michael lowered into a wheelchair and asked to hold the cloth to his own head. Of all the fears Diane has ever known, fear of flying, of snakes, of seeing the Styx minus sign become a plus, never has she known a fear like watching her husband's face paint the water red. The paramedic pushes the wheelchair forward. The nurse holds the door open for Michael to be pushed through, and Diane follows, feeling useless. Inside, the waiting room is empty, the floor a checkerboard. The woman at the front desk is rude. The hallways are hot. The x-ray room is cold. Then Michael is on a table, and she's at his side. The betadine goes on, and Michael winces, his forehead orange. The needles go in, and she has to look away. She holds his hand. The next time she looks, 8 Frankensteinian stitches hold his head together. They fill the gap between eyebrow and hairline, as though Michael's left eyebrow has an eyebrow of its own. Then the x-rays are in, and all is well. Good enough for this country doctor anyway, though Michael gives Diane a look that says, when we get home, I'm getting a second opinion. Not that they can afford a second opinion. What with the mortgage they can hardly handle on a house that's worth half what they paid in 2007, 4 maxed out credit cards, plus Diane's student loans, which no matter how hard she ignores them, aren't exactly going anywhere. Still, she's glad to see Michael talking, smiling. Mostly, though, she's happy she won't have to change his diapers till death do them part. That said, there is a diaper she wouldn't mind changing in fewer than 7 months. This love for a thing unborn, a thing that isn't even yet a thing. How to explain this love to her husband? She promised him she'd never want a child, and she'd meant it at the time. The mistake wasn't getting pregnant. The mistake was making a promise that was never hers to keep. The doctor scrubs his hands. A nurse will be with them shortly to discuss care and cleaning, he says, then dries his hands and leaves. Michael is still on the table, lying down. His eyes are on her middle, as though he can see beyond her waist into her womb. We're keeping it, she wants to say, but doesn't. Not yet. She's not religious, but she is superstitious. It seems bad luck to fight about the pregnancy today, as though doing so might invite the spirit of the dead boy into her, might curse her with a baby born blue-lipped without breath. If fates are steered by thoughts, by words, the least Diane can do on this day is keep quiet. So she lets her husband hold her hand. She smiles. And there are many, many, many things she does not say. So that's Diane. That's chapter 4. Mark, rejoin me, please. Thank you. Thank you for all the virtual thumbs up and clapping. Stacy, we might need you to unmute Mark. There he is. All right.
Am I back?
You're back.
Oh
Now
my
it's
God,
time for us to-
Jamie. Great. I have so many questions for you about this that were, and like a few that just came up while you were reading. But
Okay.
first of all, thank you so much. I love that chapter, that specific chapter. That goes like in you're introducing all of the characters chapter by chapter in the very beginning.
Mhm.
I remember this one actually striking me as a departure from the ways that the others had been like stylistically presented. And it had this rhythm to it. And she is someone who's not part of the family proper. She's like, by marriage. So this was a good chapter to read from the just like simply stylistic point of view. So why this one instead of, the Thad chapter or the Michael chapter or the father or Mother Starling?
Why did I write it this way, or why did I read?
No,
read it
why
tonight?
did you read that one? Just for everybody, because you said you usually read
I'm
the first.
sure. I think I read it because it's probably the shortest chapter in the book.
Oh.
And virtual readings are, let's keep them short. But but no, I love Diane's opening chapter, and yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, she does that chapter is very interior, and she has this kind of rhythm to her voice. So it's a particularly fun one to kind of read aloud.
Okay. Do you mind if I just like jump into some of these questions about this book, because it's on my mind. I'm reading it like currently leading up to this thing, and I just have so much to ask you.
Yeah, of course.
Sure. The first thing I wanted to ask was just like, this book is an incredible character study of like 6 characters that get fully realized. And it's one of the joys of this is just getting to know these people as they become like 3-dimensional. We get to know them. And I'm wondering, was there a character that started this off for you? Was there someone that you saw as more central and then the rest of the people grew up around them? Or how did you manage to keep all of them together and progressing and seeming to have like equal like page time?
Yeah, thank you. So this novel kind of arose out of characters I'd already worked with. 2 of the stories in my first collection deal with Richard and Lisa, and they deal with the death of their daughter June from SIDS in like the late 80s, early 90s. And I always wondered what kind of happened to them as a couple. And with the novel, I pick up their lives 30, 35 years later, and they have 2 grown sons. So originally I thought it would be a novel about the parents, and then I got really interested in the sons. And so then I thought it would be a novel about Michael and Thad, the brothers. And then the more I started writing about them, I got interested in their partners, Jake and Diane. And eventually I realized like all 6 of these characters are going to have to take their turn telling the story. And so, they're not exactly evenly weighted. Michael and Thad, I think each get about 8 chapters the parents get 7 chapters apiece, and then the in-laws get 5 chapters apiece. But yeah, I kind of wanted to, everyone has their own kind of idea of what reality is, and so seeing the same events through different eyes was kind of the fun of this project for me.
Okay. I did. Oh my God. That while you were saying that, I remember that. Was it originally called The Heaven of Geometry, or
The Geometry of Despair? Yeah.
Geometry of Despair?
Yeah. I read it for the first time
Oh.
at Arizona 5 for one of those whip readings. What did we call the student reading series?
The Works in Progress?
Yeah, whip. Yeah, that's right. Works in Progress. Yeah.
So my God, that's them.
Yeah, that's them.
Okay, that's really fascinating. Okay, cool. You said we talked a little bit last night, just in preparation for this, a little bit and to catch up. And you said something that you need to own right now. And it's that through writing this novel, you'd spent 15 years writing stories. You went to the MFA program, you went to the PhD program at Cincinnati, and you've been a short story writer. And you wrote this novel, and I know that it took you years to write this and revise this and get into it. And you said that this was all a learning process, and now you know how to write a novel because you learned it while writing this novel. There's a bunch of writers in the room here. So can you just tell us, Jamie, how do you write a novel?
I don't know, Mark, how do you write a story?
No. What did you learn from writing this that's going to go into your next one?
So I'll start with the first thing I always tell my students, which is, that the doctor's creed, which is first do no harm. So anything I say that doesn't work for you, please ignore my advice. But for me, I really found that writing a novel was nothing like writing a story, and I'm sure I'm not the first writer to say that, and not just simply because of the length or the endurance to hold on for that long, but because I'd written stories for so long that I had gotten pretty good at writing them in terms of the pacing was beginning to feel intuitive. My ability to, if I'm on page 10 of a story, I remember if I've already used the word cerulean on page 1 and I'm not going to use it again. But
I would just say once is too many for that word. Yeah. I would never do if I'd used it.
Yeah, but with a novel, like by the time you get to page 200, not only do you not remember which words you've already used, you don't even remember your character's origin stories anymore. You don't remember what you've already said, what you thought you were going to say, why they're doing things. So it's so much just and revising. So anything about my novel that's a success just comes from years of rewriting the same book over and over, and trying to comb out the redundancies, try to give some integrity to the sentences, so that they read cleanly, and just try to tell a story all the way through without repeating myself.
To that point, this is one thing I've really been enjoying about the book, is that on the sentence level, this is a joy.
And thank you. Thanks.
No, it's really good. And I paused several times to reread lines and just look at how you've done it. And if you're writing something that's 300 pages long, and I know that it was even longer, and you have cut it back, to actually pay that much attention to the sentence level seems sort of mystical to me, where you have all of these lines, you have all of these characters, and it's enough of a problem to tell the story and keep everything straight, as you're saying, to deal with something of this length. But each sentence seems individually cared for. And I wonder, I've talked to other writers who write incredibly slowly, where the sentences form in real time and they do not progress until the sentence is right. It may get edited, it may get revised, but it takes incredibly long to actually craft the sentences and the paragraphs. With this, is your ability to actually land emphasis and create this energy in the lines from the act of writing them, or is it revision after revision after revision for sentences?
It's definitely revision. So one thing we talked about learning to write a novel, you write a novel. The first thing I learned was it's not a wise choice to spend a lot of time on the sentences in the first draft. I did that for my first draft. I spent years on the first draft, got it what I thought was good at the sentence level, and then the first thing my editor and I realized is the first 100 had to go. The novel originally took place over 4 days, and then we realized everything about the first day was just the family coming to the lake and origin stories and backstory, and chapter 11 had begun with this boy drowning. And my editor said, what if the in chapter 1, everything that, all that throat clearing before the drowning, you could summarize in a couple sentences on what, chapter 2. And she was absolutely right. And I cried for like 2 days and threw away a year of work. But then I realized it's too bad. I did it to myself. I spent all this time polishing these sentences for pages I didn't even know if I'd be able to use. So, and some writers have to work that way, and I can respect that too. But for myself, I realized on the next few drafts, I was not going to polish those lines until I knew that I was going to use what I had. Because a lot, the story, the novel ballooned up to over 600 pages. And then once we had kind of the plot fleshed out and the chapters and the structure set, then I could get to tinkering and really hone those sentences.
Okay. I have a question just to continue on the characters. Some of the reviews of your book are really good.
Thank you.
Congratulations. These are good reviews. And one thing that I saw in common, besides just praise for how well crafted this book is that the characters themselves, however well rendered, are sort of bad or ugly people in some way. That we're looking at a group of people that in some ways are unlikable, and we get to know them and it's great, but how do we actually reconcile that when reading a book? It's not been my experience the same way as some of the reviews I've read, but I wanted to know from you, how do you feel about the characters in this book? And do you feel like it is necessary at some point to actually like all of your characters, or can you write them well and also dislike them?
Yeah, so I would never tell a reader that there's something wrong with them if they don't like one of the characters, or that there's something broken in their soul just because they find someone unlikable. But for me as the writer, I have to love all of them. Even Michael, who is a lot in this novel, and he's pretty difficult, and he does some pretty unspeakably cruel things. By the end, even for me, he's redeemed, just because he's human. He has parents, and he has a wife who loves him, and he is making poor choices, but there's a tenderness to him. So yeah, I've always, as a reader, I think I just tend to find even the most unlikable characters compelling, and I have empathy for them. That said, yeah, the reviews vary from finding these characters, worthy of our sympathy, to finding them unlikable but realistically depicted. And I'm fine with both of those.
I almost feel like the reviewers or the critics are revealing something about themselves as you sort of couched in your preamble there. It's I'm not going to call you out for being incomplete as a human, but these are people. The cool thing about a novel like yours is that you can actually get to know these people almost better than the people in your life, because you can see so much of them, their choices, their reasoning, and how they deal with it, where a lot of times we just get presented stuff by other people. And in this book, you get to see it fully. And I think that if anybody were to sort of catalog their worst moments and then try to put them down and justify them, or talk about the ways in which they reason them, you would have just a human being, not a horrible human being. Certain leaders notwithstanding. Anyway.
No, I think that's so well said. If you could just be sold with the book and just come along and give that preamble to every reader before they read it, to give all these characters a chance, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely.
But I have questions for you too before we take
Okay,
questions from.
you're gonna have to fight me for the time to ask questions, so go for it.
Okay, so no, the thing I'm most interested in, so your first book, Pop, which I read and taught, is a hybrid memoir, fiction, novel, story collection, essay collection thing. And then your collection is a series of stories. Some are realist, some are what we used to call meta, some are fabulist. So, you're asking me about the difference between writing stories and novels. I want to ask you about the difference between writing fiction and nonfiction, and the difference between, writing realism and really, really awesome out there stuff.
Um, it's an interesting thing to write in different genres, and you've done this too, like just like switching from like nonfiction to fiction. If you are a writer, and there's people in the room here who do both or do even more, I think that there is a reason why each one exists, and they satisfy certain desires that we have as writers and as readers. And there seems to be rare times where they coincide and you're like, well, wait, I'm in this situation that feels fictional and it's real. How do I tell this story that to me seems unreal, but it happened? And that to me is like sort of the place where a lot of my stories live. While most of them I just push into fiction, that book, Pop, is all the stories from basically losing my father at a young age suddenly, and then dealing with it for a decade afterward, which seemed unreal. And I think of stories, I teach a class called Unreal Literature, and that's the umbrella term I use for like speculative or science fiction or absurdism or magic or surrealism. The events of my life seemed surreal. So it seemed almost to be more truthful to say, here is this memoir that takes on all of these unreal elements, but I'm going to tell you that these things happened. And I'm going to mix them up with all of these types of stories and elements and images that are impossible to give the impression of what it was like to live through it. For me, the difference between writing that book and everything else was simply confronting things head on without the mask of fiction. So anytime I write a story and hand it off to an editor or a friend, or I write something, I have this like really nice protective distance where it's like, here's this episode, here's all of these thoughts and reactions and characters. I'm not any of them, or you cannot assume that I am. And the simple act of saying that something is partially true is a step, and to take that on and say like, this is me, is the part where I feel is the most dangerous. And writing that book seemed much more dangerous to me than writing fiction. Fiction is where I feel comfortable. It's a land of like exploration, and nonfiction seemed to me like, people are going to actually hear what I say and what I experienced. That's the emotional difference of writing it. I think, though, that when it comes to actually writing things that are realist, still fiction, but realist, I'd still balk when I'm done with it. And I'm like, I've missed something, because I'm always looking for that element that would make it unrealistic. I'm looking for that little bit of magic that turns it into something beyond realistic fiction. I don't know exactly why that is, but I think it's some ways of which, I read in my formative writing years in ways in which I sort of like live in my head constantly and don't see anything as truly real.
No, yeah. I get exactly what you're saying. I'm envious that you're able to write fiction and feel that totally protective shield, because even when I write fiction, I feel like I still get questions like, oh, well, which character are you, or which of this stuff really happened, right? So it doesn't feel like as much like a shield to me, but you feel like that gives you complete immunity.
Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I think. So when I hand it over, it's like, if anybody were to if I were to wind up in court with it, I feel protected. if anybody were to like really look closely and be like, that person is exactly like our mutual friend, I'd be like, well, it's fiction.
I see. And so you talked about your reading and the reading, the formative reading that informs how you think about magic now. Maybe you could tell us one or two of the most formative books, and then what are you reading now that is continuing to inform your writing?
I would say, there's a couple parts of Jesus' Son, the Dennis Johnson book, that will
Oh yeah.
never leave me. It will never leave me. And some like that is a book that seems like poetic. It seems true. It's fiction, and there are parts that take like flight into something just a tiny bit beyond reality that have stuck in my brain in an amazing way that has led me to think of this stuff as a transcendent experience to write and to read, and always looking for those moments. But also, like, it is stuck in my brain as there is something around the corner of everything. Like in the hallucinogenic state, the psychedelic state that book takes place in seems to me true. And I always want to explore ways of doing that. I also think that some of the absurdist stuff of like Donald Barthelme has like stopped me in my tracks and just said, okay, there is an extremely hilarious reductive way of looking at life and death in the school, or looking at, some of us have been threatening our friend Colby and saying like, yeah, this is society reduced into something hilarious and exposes something. That deep satire really appeals to me too, which isn't real, but it's always about something real. What am I reading right now? I am reading Lake Life by David James Poissant, who's someone I don't know. You're Jamie. You're always going to be Jamie. But I've also been rereading some stuff. I was actually rereading Kevin Brockmeyer's The Illumination.
Oh yeah, yeah, amazing book.
Which is in some ways, it's a lot of characters. It's an ensemble. It's coming together for this magical event. And I read that years ago, and I just wanted to check back in with it to see how he did that.
So, and I swear we didn't plan this. This is funny though that you brought up that book, because there are some characters with the last name Poissant in that novel.
Oh, there's one name. There's Brockmeyer in your book.
Yeah, and so as a nod, I threw a Brockmeyer. Yeah, there's an Officer Brockmeyer in Lake Life.
And a shout out for the app Libby on my phone. I get all of you can just get all your library books for free. Yes, Libby, the Libby app.
Excellent.
You sometimes have to wait, but it's free.
So yeah, we've got a ton of questions coming in here. Rich Farrell, who also has a novel out this month, asks, what has been the hardest part of virtual launches for you both? Mark, what about you?
I was really bummed at first because this book was coming out, and I had some friends, helping me out setting up this stuff. So it felt like there was a lot of hands on deck for this. People in the local community in Boston, people at BOA, setting stuff up for like AWP, which I didn't wind up even going to. So I felt really bummed to not be able to follow through on everything that everybody had worked so hard on. But some of this stuff has been okay. And like I said, if I were to do the launch at Trident, or do like we had an event at Harvard Bookstore set up, to go and do that would be wonderful because we could all interact. But people from around the country couldn't obviously be there. It would limit the crowd to local. The hardest part about this for me is not being able to sign a book, shake anybody's hand, see anybody coming up and saying like, I'm really excited to read this, or I read this, it's really great, thanks. None of that is happening in the house doing the virtual event. And also, my book has not been a bestseller, which I imagine is only due to the pandemic in these virtual events.
I think that is one thing we can all take comfort in. All authors launching this summer can blame their lack of bestseller status, both of us included, on the pandemic for sure. Um, yeah, my answer would be the same as yours. I had the tour set, and the cool thing is now that when I do a virtual event, you can have someone from Argentina and someone from California and someone from Boston all in the same room, and that's really, really rewarding. But I miss meeting readers. They're not just customers; like they're people who you've shared a piece of your soul with, and you want to talk with them in person about the book, and you don't get to do that, and that's less fun.
Yeah,
Um,
and also, I mean, you can't go to. I don't know what's going on. You're in Orlando, the Orlando area. What is it, Oviedo?
yeah, we're in Oviedo. Yeah.
I haven't been able to go to a bookstore, and go into the bookstore and see my book there or something like that, which is just like a cool thing in realizing that books are still physical and that bookstores exist. Belmont Books apparently is like you can't like go in there to go shop normally yet. Some bookstores, I guess, you're able to do this, but that's a real bummer. I mean, it's so great to browse, see what just came out, and I
Mhm.
think that any book that's coming out during this gets robbed of the sort of stumble upon it at the bookstore moment, which I found so many books that way. Just walking into your favorite indie bookstore and they've laid out what you want or like what they like, and then you just turn out to really want it too. So that's all sort of out the window.
Yeah, and hopefully with a glass half full kind of outlook. My hope is after this, people will realize how much they've needed their indie bookstores. And I know I'm going to drop hundreds of dollars on books at my local indies as soon as this is safe, because I want to support them and realize just how much we needed them before we couldn't have them open to us.
Yeah.
Leslie Morgan asks, if you're about to query agents regarding a first novel, any tips to make the best impression possible? How do you know a novel is as done as it can be? That is a great question. So my advice.
This one's for you.
Okay. So my advice is, first, you want to make sure that you're querying the right agents. I think agents can tell when you're kind of just carpet bombing all of New York and sending your manuscript to 100 people. And what I suggest is, what I tell my students, some of whom have had luck with this strategy, look at the books that aren't necessarily your favorite books, but look at the books that you think are doing what your book is doing. So if I were to say, I'm a Southern writer, I'm writing a family novel, then who are other Southern writers who are writing the kind of book I write? And then you go to the library or the bookstore, or in this time of quarantine, you Google it and you find out who their agent is. It's not hard to figure it out. And then you understand, okay, this agent would like the kind of thing I'm doing and has sold the kind of thing I want to be sold on my behalf. So when you write a query letter, and it takes a while, it can take a day just to write a couple good ones, but you shouldn't just have a form letter. You should tailor each letter to the specific agent and say like, hey, you represent Ann Patchett. I think my novel is very much in that kind of Ann Patchett realm in terms of its structure and its themes of family, et cetera, et cetera. And talk about why you like the people they represent and why you think that your book would be a good fit for them. That will endear them to you if you mean it earnestly and sincerely. Never name writers who you don't actually know their work. Name people who you know their work and you think their work is resonant with your own work. But if you query, say, 30 agents and you don't get a single request to see more of the manuscript, then you could probably say the novel's not done yet, and I would take one more pass. I would also never send out a book, stories or a novel or a memoir, until you're sure it's done and you've put it in a drawer for at least a couple months. Because when you take it out of that drawer a couple months later, you're going to be able to look at it much more objectively with fresh eyes, as if it's someone else's work, and be more honest with yourself about whether it's really done or whether it's could use one more pass. And I would not send anything out that you don't think is as perfect as you can get it. If you know there are mistakes, then don't send it out, because you really only get one chance per agent per book.
there's also so many, there's a lot of bad books on the shelf too, Jamie. Those books got published. What about those? Those are fine.
Well, but we know Leslie Morgan's not writing a bad book.
True.
So
I would also say, like, just to tack on, after you do all of that, don't jump at the first person who says, like, let's do this. Make sure that you actually see eye to eye on what you want to do with the book.
yeah, and in an ideal world, you'll have a couple agents ask to see the manuscript, and a couple might even make an offer, and then it's a good time to spend some time on the phone and really talk to them and say, is your vision for the book my vision? I do have friends who've worked with agents only to find after they signed that the agent wants them to rewrite the book from scratch. That's definitely a conversation you should have before agreeing to work with somebody if you think the book is mostly done. Let's see, Vanessa Nickerson asks.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, I believe I know who that is. Yeah, we all went to Arizona together. She says, can you talk about your process when you're writing from a perspective that isn't yours? And for Mark, I love this story so much, particularly the gorgeous descriptive prose and imagery. How did this idea develop? So Mark, why don't you start on this one?
Is that a question? So Vanessa, hi, how you doing, Vanessa? How did this story come to be? What was happening with the story? Used goods. I have done, or at the time when I sort of wrote that or conceived of it, I was doing a lot of moving around, and it's about how like I was someone who every academic year, every New Year's, every new place that I moved to, every phase, I was like, I literally would say to myself, I'm like, I got the chance now. Like, I can do this. Every new notebook I get, I'm like, it's a new opportunity. And I feel like I can always like reinvent. And there are certain things that just never, ever get reinvented. And it's sort of, you always take yourself wherever you are. Like you're always there, regardless of like how you reconceive like what you're going to be doing. And so for me, it was trying to encapsulate the feeling of moving. You're still pretty young. You're trying to start over. You're trying to do something that'll get you out of your rut, and that you just, a couple things wind up accruing the same way that they've always come to be. And I wanted to capture that feeling in a way. And when I actually feel like there's something to be said, I try to like approach stories from images, and I try to approach stories from maybe like a line or a character or a moment. And I don't want to do something pedantic, so I want to hide whatever it is I wanted to say. And if I don't come up with a big enough show to hide anything that I want to say, it's usually a failure. But I feel like that story grew around an idea, and the image took over for the idea. So originally I wanted to just say like, wherever you go, the same stuff seems to happen no matter like what your intentions are. How do I write that? And then when I actually considered the concept of used goods in a comedic way, where it was, oh, the used goods would actually be stuff that you couldn't use again, like empty bottles, like finished games, like empty pens, like someone else's to-do list. Then I was just like, okay, I'm just going to write the setting, have someone move through it. And I think that if I just focus on that enough, whatever brought this about will just come through. And that was it.
That's excellent. That's, yeah. Wow. It's really neat to see you talk about your process that way. I like that. Let's see, what did Vanessa ask me? She said, oh,
writing from another person's perspective.
Yeah, the other point of view. Yeah, it's not something I take lightly. I think almost everything that's in my book is based on people that I'm very close to, close friends, loved ones, things people I know have said or done, and conversations we've had about the things that motivated them to do that. Interestingly, the hardest character to write in the book was the character of Richard, who is the father. He was the character who narrated the two stories about the starlings in the collection. And I returned to the book thinking he'd be the easiest to write. And he was the hardest to write for me, partly because each of these family members has a secret. His secret is that he has had an affair. And I wasn't comfortable asking all my friends and loved ones, hey, have you had an affair? And if so, are you keeping it a secret? And if so, why? And what was that experience like for you? So, that one I had to do a lot of research and read a lot of articles and essays by people and who talked about infidelity and what it meant to them and sort of why they did it. And it took a while to get into Richard's head and figure out not only one, why he did what he did, but two, why he would confess to his son that he did this thing instead of just keeping it a secret to the grave. So yeah, I mean, I think it's very difficult to write from other points of view. There are certainly certain identities I would not take on as a writer, but
what are those?
I mean, at the moment, I have no interest in writing from a Black point of view or a person of color. I don't think that America needs a white guy writing Black voices. So any situation in which I'm taking away the opportunity for someone to write from their own voice is not something that I feel like is my job right now. I mean, it's certainly been done. It's been done well. Zadie Smith has a really provocative essay out earlier this year about just that issue, where she pretty much calls the idea of cultural appropriation into question. But it's not something that I'm comfortable with at the moment. Let's see what's next. There's a bunch here. Mark, do you have a particular question you're excited to answer?
I can't see very well.
Oh, okay.
So,
yep.
I would love it if these could be culled and curated.
Okay, here's a good one. Is entering a book of short stories into contests the best way to try to publish it versus seeking an agent? What do you think makes a fantastic short story?
Okay, Jamie has a collection of short stories. That was his first book. And Jamie went the route of agents, novels, editors, big New York places. I started off with a memoir hybrid thing, had an agent, didn't wind up getting it done that way and done through another route. The short story stuff, the short story market, if that's all you've got is a collection of short stories, it's fantastic. They're like my first love. I don't know how there were so many short story collections available to me when I was reading and becoming a writer. It seems now almost impossible for that to happen. Or it takes forever for people to get their collections out. But there are opportunities. There are great presses. There are a lot of indie presses that, yes, run contests. And these prizes for short fiction get a little bit of attention. And these are good places that will do really caring work with whatever you are presenting them. And you get to say that you're a prize winner, which is kind of cool. But there are so many places that close to submissions, right? So if you're unagented, you've got to go a route where someone's open to that, and then you're either a slush pile, or they're only publishing 10 books a year, so there's got to be some sort of inside track going on other than agents, but it's some sort of networking. It's disheartening. So there are routes to take, and that would be contests. That would be dedicated small presses and indie presses that are good, that publish something that you actually like, and then trying to get your foot in the door with either a contest or a submission there, getting someone to read it, and they might say, give us your next book, stuff like that. But you will get read, guaranteed, to these places that are open to book prizes and short story contests. You get your stuff read, it's all anonymous. So is it the best way? I think that the odds of winning the prize that I won were negative. I don't know. It was like such a horrible percentage. But out of that, you are guaranteed to get something read, and you will have to just throw it up to the fates and the gods of that person having their cup of coffee and feeling good that day when they pick up your manuscript. That is still in play wherever you go. But I think that it's viable, and I think that there are small presses and indie presses that do great work, and this is one of the roads to publication for a short story collection, if you don't have an attached novel, if you are not an established author already.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. When I look at the Story Prize every year and I look at the number of submissions, there's usually only about 100 story collections published a year, including from the big presses and all the wonderful small presses like BOA, like the Flannery O'Connor Prize, the Iowa Prize, places like that. Whereas there's thousands of novels published every year. So it is much, much, much harder to publish even a brilliant collection than it is to publish, even an average novel. So I don't think there's anything wrong with certainly you can start with an agent, but I think most agents will tell you, even if the collection is brilliant, without kind of a novel to attach it to, they're a very hard sell in this market. Whereas there are lots of incredible small and independent and university presses and contests that are publishing great short story collections, many of which wind up winning huge awards later on, even if they began, I think Rion Scott Amilcar's collection, The Insurrections, was like University of Kentucky Press, and then it won the Penn Bingham, which is like the $25,000 like huge first short fiction prize, and deservedly so.
Nominated for.
Different. I think we were different years, but his collection totally deserved to win, and after it won that huge prize and people began to read it, then this sort of became this question, like, why didn't this book come out with a big press? And the fact is, there's just so many great collections, and the larger presses aren't giving a lot of space in their catalog for collections, that they're missing out on great stuff. So smaller presses are a great place to send these collections, and they can still get attention and longer lives beyond just what they get with the prize they may win to be published. They're eligible for a number of prizes afterward.
Sure.
But yeah, I think I'm getting the wrap-up signal here. So is there any last thing you want to say, Mark, about the okay end of Funnytown, or about life, or Arizona, or?
I would say this was a blast to get to talk to you about this. And I wrote this before, but I am so interested in how you worked on this thing and how it came to be, because I'm in love with it. So Lake Life is a blast. It is a beast on the craft level. Everybody should go get it. Thank you for doing this with me, Jamie. It's been so nice. And thank you to Belmont Bookstore.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Mark. Your book is a pleasure, and it's an amazing collection of stories written over 15 years. And I was so bummed that we didn't get to do our sort of 3-city tour together, but this has not been a small consolation prize. This has been an awesome chance to get together. And Belmont really saved us. They rescued us when we lost our readings. Yeah. And they stepped up. They gave us a Zoom home, and they're selling our books. And we are profoundly grateful for that. And we thank everyone who stuck with us for the whole hour too.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for sticking around.
Well, you guys were great. I love the rapport between the two of you, and your books seem really amazing, and you had some great advice for people. So I thank you both so much for doing this. And I thank everybody who came tonight. You all asked really great questions and really thoughtful questions. And I think it was just a really enjoyable event. So I thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
All right, everybody be safe. Have a great night and take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for coming.
Bye.